Original story by Twilight Rex. Day 47 of the expedition, we found a hole in the ice. Perfectly circular, 12 feet across, going straight down 600 feet through Antarctic bedrock, and I was the one they sent down to investigate. My name is Dr. Paul Abati. I'm 31 years old, geophysicist by training, hired by Helix Resource Solutions for what they called geological surveying and subsurface mapping. The pay was exceptional, the kind of money that makes you sign contracts without reading the fine print too carefully. We all knew we were skirting the Antarctic Treaty, mapping mineral deposits that nobody was supposed to be claiming, but Helix had lawyers who assured us everything was technically legal. Technically. The crew was small. Captain Samir Crane ran the ship. Casey Hayes led the scientific team, 43 years old, sharp eyes that missed nothing. 3 technicians whose names I barely learned because none of us talked much. 1 medic. 6 people total, and we kept to ourselves like monks in separate cells. That's how these operations work. You do your job, collect your paycheck, and you don't form the kinds of bonds that might make you ask inconvenient questions later. Day 47. That's when everything changed. I was running a routine sonar sweep, mapping the ocean floor beneath the ice shelf when the equipment started acting wrong. Not broken, not malfunctioning, wrong. GPS signal dropped completely, dead air where satellites should have been screaming location data. I thought it was interference, solar activity. Then I checked the gravitational sensors. My stomach dropped. The readings showed a point source, a single location pulling everything toward it like a drain. Gravity doesn't work that way. Gravity is planetary, diffuse, spread across mass. This was focused, concentrated, and the numbers were impossible. I called Crane to the lab. She looked at the screens, at the spinning compass, at the gravitational anomaly that shouldn't exist. "Log it," she said. "We note the coordinates, mark it as unexplained interference, and we move on to the next survey grid." That would have been the end of it. Should have been. But Hayes was already in the room, already looking over my shoulder at the data, and her face had that expression I'd learned to recognize over 6 weeks of careful observation. Not surprised, prepared. Like she'd been waiting for exactly this kind of reading to show up. "This is exactly what we're here for," Hayes said, and Crane's jaw tightened because we all knew what that meant. We were going to investigate. We were going to go directly toward the thing that was making our instruments scream warnings. We were going to follow protocol. We took the Zodiac across 2 miles of broken sea ice, me and Hayes and one of the technicians who operated the camera equipment. Crane stayed on the Sirius, watching through binoculars, probably composing the incident report she'd have to file if we disappeared. The ice shelf rose in front of us like a wall, 200 feet of compacted snow and glacial ice that had been building for thousands of years. The anomaly was up there, somewhere on that shelf. We found it in 20 minutes. The hole was perfectly circular, 12 feet across, edges machined smooth like something had cored it out with industrial precision. It went straight down through the ice shelf, a geometric impossibility in a landscape where nothing was geometric, where everything was chaos and fracture and the slow violence of freezing water. I stood at the edge and looked down into darkness that seemed to swallow my headlamp beam. Hayes knelt at the edge, running her gloved hand along the rim. "This wasn't drilled, this was made," she said. We lowered camera equipment down on 300 feet of industrial cable. The feed showed smooth ice walls, nothing out of the ordinary. At 350 feet, the video started distorting. At 400 feet, right where the ice shelf ended and bedrock should have begun, the camera showed carved stone. Then the feed cut to black. We hauled the camera back up. The technician turned it over in his hands, checking the casing. "It's warm," he said. "Battery's completely dead. Should have lasted 3 hours on this charge." He checked his watch. We've been recording for 8 minutes. We tried again with the backup camera. Same result, distortion, then black, then a dead battery and warm casing when we retrieved it. The mechanical depth gauge told us the shaft continued at least 600 feet past where the cameras died, straight down into bedrock. We huddled on the ice next to the hole, breath fogging in air that was suddenly too cold despite the thermal suits. Hayes spoke first, and her voice had the careful neutrality of someone making a decision she'd already made. "We need to go down there. This is unprecedented." Crane's voice crackled through the radio from the Sirius. "Absolutely not. We report this, we wait for proper equipment, we follow actual protocol instead of whatever the hell this is." The technicians stayed quiet. They wouldn't look at me, and I noticed that. Hayes turned to me, and her expression was too calm. "You have climbing experience, correct? Technical rope work?" I did. Cave exploration in grad school, vertical descents into limestone caverns in Kentucky. Training that had been recreational once, but had somehow made it onto my resume when I applied to Helix. I'd thought it was irrelevant when they hired me. I'd been wrong. "One-person descent," Hayes continued. "Minimal risk. Observe and return. We need eyes on whatever's down there, and we need them now before conditions change." Crane objected through the radio, her voice tight with the kind of anger that comes from being overruled before you've even made your argument. But Hayes had operational authority. That was in the contract, in the fine print we'd all ignored. Scientific lead had final say on field decisions. Crane could log a protest, but she couldn't stop this. I should have said no. I said yes because I was curious, because the pay was too good to jeopardize with cowardice, because some part of me wanted to see what was down there in the dark. One of the technicians muttered something to the other. I caught it just barely over the wind. "Better him than us." They both glanced at me, then away. Hayes was already unpacking the gear. Industrial climbing harness, helmet with mounted LED, radio headset, emergency beacon. Everything we needed, everything ready. Why did we have a friction hitch and static rope on a Zodiac? You don't bring spelunking gear to a sonar sweep unless you know you're going to find a hole. "Suit up," Hayes said. "We're burning daylight." I suited up, and 20 minutes later I was clipping into the anchor point. Industrial climbing harness first, the kind designed for rescue operations and deep well work, rated for loads that would tear a recreational climber's gear apart. Hayes checked the buckles twice, tugging each strap hard enough that I felt the bite through my thermal layers. Helmet next, with an LED array mounted on the front. 3,000 lumens, enough to burn your skin. Radio headset clipped to my collar, microphone positioned against my throat so even whispers would transmit. Emergency beacon in my chest pocket, the kind that would scream location data to satellites if I triggered it, though I doubted satellites could hear anything through 600 feet of ice and bedrock. Hayes handed me a GoPro on a chest mount. "Document everything," she said. "Every formation, every anomaly, every detail." Then she pulled out a collection kit, specialized containers I didn't recognize. Thick acrylic with rubber seals and biohazard symbols stamped on the sides. "If you see anything unusual, samples are priority." I turned one of the containers over in my gloved hands. The seal was complex, triple locked. What am I supposed to be sampling? Anything that doesn't belong. She didn't elaborate. The thermal suit was rated for -40 Celsius, though my temperature gauge fluctuated wildly. The air from the shaft felt warmer than it should, and that wrongness settled into my chest. Crane went over the safety protocols, her voice tight with the kind of controlled tension that comes from sending someone into a situation you know is wrong but can't stop. Tug signals. 1 tug means you're okay, checking in. 2 tugs means pull you up, abort mission. 3 tugs means emergency extraction. We haul you up as fast as the rope allows, regardless of what's happening down there. Understood? Understood. You feel anything wrong? Anything at all? You signal immediately. I don't care if it's just nerves or a bad feeling. 2 tugs. We pull you up. No questions, no arguments. I nodded. The anchor was already set, a heavy steel plate chained to the Zodiac's frame with enough redundancy to hold 5 times my weight. The rope was static line, low-stretch kern mantle designed for technical rescue, bright orange so it would show up against the ice. They tested it with 300 pounds of weight, watched it hold without creep. Hayes stepped back, nodded once. Good luck, Dr. Abati. I clipped into the rope, checked my harness one final time, and looked down into the hole. I stepped over the edge and began my descent. The first 100 feet was routine, or as routine as dropping into an impossible shaft through Antarctic ice could be. I pushed off the walls with my feet, controlling the descent, calling up through the radio. All good. Ice formation is unusual but stable. Hayes' voice came back clear. Copy that. Continue descent. At 150 feet, my temperature gauge jumped, warmer. The reading climbed from -40 to -30 in the span of 10 feet, which was unheard of. Temperature should decrease with depth, especially this close to bedrock. The ice around me should be getting colder, denser, more stable. Instead, it felt like I was descending into something that was heating the shaft from below, 200 feet. Shadows felt wrong, angling away from my light source instead of with it. And when I looked directly at them, they'd disappear, only to reappear in my peripheral vision. Strange formations ran through the ice like frozen lightning, branching patterns that were too regular to be natural fractures. At 250 feet, pressure built in my ears. Not the gradual increase you'd expect from depth, but a sudden crushing weight that made my sinuses hurt. I worked my jaw, trying to equalize, but the pressure kept building. A headache behind my eyes, sharp and immediate, like someone had driven a spike between my eyes. The radio started buzzing. Hayes' voice came through distorted, breaking up into fragments. Abati, you're breaking status? Still good. I had to force the words out through clenched teeth. Visibility decreasing. The response was mostly static, a few syllables that might have been acknowledgement or might have been random noise shaped by my brain into familiar sounds. At 300 feet, I could see the bottom of the ice shelf approaching. The transition was abrupt. One moment I was surrounded by crystalline and stone that looked like it had never seen daylight. 350 feet. The radio was mostly static now, occasional bursts of sound that might have been words if I tried hard enough to hear them. I called up anyway, keeping to protocol. Approaching bedrock. Ice shelf ends here. Continuing descent. If there was a response, I couldn't make it out through the white noise buzzing in my ears. The last clear message I caught was Hayes' voice, distant and fragmented. Continue. Bedrock. Document. Everything. Then just static. I kept descending. 400 feet. Ice ended. Carved stone began. The shaft continued downward, still perfectly round. But now the walls were covered in weird patterns, carved deep into the bedrock. Lines and angles and shapes. Not decorative. Purposeful and precise. And reached one hand and touched the wall as I descended past. The stone was warm. Not hot, but distinctly warmer than it should be down here. Rock this deep, this close to bedrock that had been frozen for millions of years, should be cold enough to burn skin. Instead, it felt almost comfortable, like sun-warmed granite in summer. 450 feet. The radio was dead static now, just white noise hissing in my ear. According to protocol, I should have stopped here, should have signaled for extraction. But Hayes had given explicit orders: continue to bedrock, document everything. And technically, I was still receiving radio signal, even if that signal was nothing but noise. I continued. 500 feet. My watch was running slow. I noticed it when I checked the time, comparing it to my mental count of elapsed minutes. The second hand stuttered, jerking forward in irregular intervals, sometimes pausing for what felt like 2 or 3 seconds before jumping ahead. 550 feet. I saw something below me, a change in the shaft wall that stood out even in the limited sphere of my headlight. The smooth, cylindrical surface was interrupted, broken by a shape that was too regular to be natural formation. I descended another 10 feet, 20, bringing it into clearer view. An opening. Perfectly rectangular, carved into the shaft wall, it led to a horizontal passage, a tunnel branching off from the main shaft into darkness my headlamp couldn't penetrate. And there was air movement. I could feel it even through my thermal suit, a gentle current flowing out of the passage. Down here, 600 feet below Antarctic ice, in a sealed shaft that shouldn't exist, air was moving from somewhere to somewhere else. I stopped my descent, hanging in the darkness above the opening. My radio was dead, just static and my own breathing amplified in my ears. I tried to call up anyway. I see something. I need to check this out. No response, just the buzz of empty frequencies. I hung there for maybe 30 seconds, running through my options. Protocol said, return to surface, report findings, wait for proper equipment and additional personnel. But Protocol hadn't anticipated this. Protocol had been written for mundane emergencies, equipment failures, weather changes. Not for impossible shafts carved by something that predated human civilization. Not for openings that led to places that shouldn't exist down here. I'm going to document to this quickly, I said to the static. 5 minutes. Just need to see what's in there. I set a friction hitch on the rope, the kind that could slide smoothly when weighted but would lock tight if I let go. A safety measure that would prevent me from falling even if I lost consciousness. It was good practice, solid technique, the kind of thing they taught in every climbing safety course. Then I unclipped from the rope. The carabiner came free with a metallic snap that echoed in the shaft. Major protocol violation, cardinal sin of vertical work. Never unclip from your safety line, never trust a single point of failure, never make yourself vulnerable to a fall you can't arrest. But the opening was only 6 feet away, an easy reach, and I could keep the rope within grabbing distance. It was fine. It would be fine. I pushed off the shaft wall, swung across the gap, caught the edge of the opening with both hands. I pulled myself up and into the horizontal passage, my headlamp cutting into darkness. The tunnel went further in, smooth and shaped. The odd patterns continued on these walls, going deeper. I walked forward, leaving the rope behind, leaving the shaft. I could see the tunnel opening into something larger, a space where my light didn't reach walls. A chamber. I kept walking. The tunnel ran for maybe 80 feet, sloping down at a gentle angle that made walking easy despite the boots and thermal suit. No dust. That's what got me. 80 feet of tunnel and there was no dust, no accumulation of time. Like someone had swept it clean yesterday. Like someone was maintaining this place. And I could feel the space opening up, expanding beyond what the tunnel should contain. The walls fell away at the edges of my light. The ceiling disappeared upward into black. I was walking into something massive. The tunnel opened into the chamber. I stopped at the threshold, and for a long moment I just stood there trying to make my brain accept what my eyes were seeing. The space was huge, ceiling lost somewhere above me, walls barely visible as curved shadows at the extreme edge of my headlamp's range. And in the center, maybe 30 feet ahead, there were stations. 3 of them, arranged in a row. I moved forward slowly, each step deliberate, my breath loud in my ears. The GoPro on my chest was recording, I told myself. Document everything. That's what Hayes said. Document and return. The stations looked organic. That's the only word that fit. They weren't built, they were grown. Dark material, almost black, with pale ribbing that could have been bone or cartilage or something else entirely. They curved upward from the floor in shapes that suggested function without revealing purpose. Consoles, maybe, or control interfaces, or something my brain couldn't properly categorize because I had no reference for what I was seeing. Cables ran from each station down into the floor, thick conduits that pulsed slightly under my headlamp beam. And there were occupants. I got closer, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The first station had someone sitting at it. Someone. Something. The word didn't matter because my brain was trying to process what I was seeing and failing, cycling through possibilities and rejecting all of them. It was massive. Even seated, even slumped forward slightly at the console, it was easily 7 or 8 feet tall. Pale white skin, completely hairless. Arms too long, torso too elongated, everything stretched and refined into something that looked almost human, but wasn't. No clothing. The skin was seamless, smooth, and I couldn't tell where the body ended and the station began. The hands, if they were hands, disappeared into the console, merged with it, part of the interface or part of the being, impossible to separate. I moved my light to the face and my breath caught. It was disturbing. That's the word that came to me, standing there in the dark, with something dead or dormant 600 feet below Antarctic ice. Like someone had taken a human face and removed everything unnecessary, everything redundant, until only the essential structure remained. The eyes were open, fully black, no whites, no pupils, just pools of darkness that reflected my headlamp beam like polished stone. Staring straight ahead at nothing, at the wall beyond the console, no decay, no mummification, no desiccation or rot or any of the 1,000 signs that come with death. It looked like it had died yesterday, like it might wake up if I touched it. I didn't touch it. I moved my light to the second station. Identical pose, identical being. Same pale skin, same elongated proportions, same black eyes staring at nothing. Calm, neutral, like they'd simply stopped functioning mid-thought and stayed that way forever. Third station, same thing. 3 beings, 3 stations, all perfectly preserved in this chamber that shouldn't exist. I stood there trying to understand, trying to make it make sense. This was Antarctic bedrock. This was 600 feet below ice that had been solid for millions of years. Nothing should be down here. Nothing could be down here. I moved closer to the first being, the first station. The console it was merged with had a surface that looked like dark glass, smooth and reflective, my headlamp beam sliding across it without catching any detail. But there were shapes under the surface, patterns that might have been controls or displays or something else entirely. I reached out, not thinking, just moving on autopilot, my gloved hand extending toward the console surface. My fingers touched it and the surface lit up, not bright, just a subtle glow spreading out from where my hand made contact, pale blue light that reminded me of bioluminescence. The patterns under the surface became visible, lines and markers and symbols I didn't recognize, arranged in configurations that suggested interface. But the console was responding, active, functional, waiting. I pulled my hand back and the glow faded slightly but didn't disappear. The patterns remained visible, pulsing gently like they were breathing. I should have left then. Should have backed away, climbed back to the rope, signaled for extraction. This was beyond my pay grade, beyond my expertise, beyond anything that fell under the category of geological surveying or mineral rights assessment or any of the lies we'd been telling ourselves about what we were really doing down here. But I didn't leave. I looked at the patterns on the console and my brain started recognizing structure. Not language, not exactly, but communication. Information arranged in ways that suggested meaning, that pulled at something in my visual cortex and made connections I didn't consciously process. There was a central symbol, larger than the others, pulsing slightly. It looked like a circle with radiating lines, simple and elegant, and when I stared at it for more than a few seconds, I felt something click in my head. Understanding without words, knowledge without learning. It was a button, or the equivalent of a button, a control, an activation point, and underneath it, a string of symbols that my brain tried to parse into meaning. Status indicator, maybe. State display. Something that told you what would happen if you pressed the button. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the console, at the symbol. Could have been minutes, could have been longer. My watch was still running slow, still stuttering through seconds that felt too long. Part of me knew what that symbol meant, knew with the same certainty I knew how to breathe, how to walk, how to recognize danger. And the status display underneath said it was ready, primed, waiting for someone to press it. I reached out again, my hand moving before my brain could catch up with what I was doing. My fingers hovered over the central symbol, close enough that the glow brightened, close enough that I could feel warmth radiating from the console surface. I should have thought about it, should have considered the implications, the possibilities, the 1,000 reasons why touching an alien control interface 600 feet underground was the worst decision I could possibly make. Document everything. That's what Hayes said. And this was documentation, wasn't it? Testing the interface, confirming it was functional, understanding what we'd found. I told myself I'd just touch it once, see what happened. That was science. That was the job. I pressed the symbol. The system was processing, accepting input, executing command. A new symbol appeared, single characters centered on the display. It pulsed once, twice, then held steady. My brain translated it without conscious effort. Received. The three beings didn't move, but something had changed. I felt it in the vibration under my feet, in the air pressure against my skin. The chamber was different now, active in a way it hadn't been before. I had activated something, sent something, called something. And deep in my gut, in that part of the brain that exists solely to recognize danger and scream warnings, I knew I had made a mistake. I backed away from the console, from the being, from the pale blue glow that was already fading back into dormancy. The symbol remained visible for a few more seconds, received, and then it disappeared, leaving only darkness and smooth glass and the faint vibration that never quite stopped. I turned and ran. Back through the chamber, feet pounding on stone. Back through the tunnel, my headlamp beam jerking wildly as I sprinted. Back to the shaft opening, where I grabbed the rope I'd left behind and clipped in with hands that shook so badly I nearly dropped the carabiner. I signaled. 3 tugs. Emergency extraction. And then I held on while they hauled me up through 600 feet of impossible shaft, back toward the surface, back toward the light. They hauled me up fast. I remember the rope burning through my friction hitch, the shaft walls blurring past, my headlamp beam jerking across stone and ice. 3 tugs meant emergency, and they took that seriously. I hit the surface and hands grabbed me, pulled me onto the ice, and I was breathing hard, hyperventilating in a way that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. Crane was there first. What the hell happened? You were gone for 47 minutes. I looked at my watch. It said 47 minutes. The numbers matched what she was telling me, but it felt wrong, felt longer or shorter. I couldn't tell anymore. Hayes was right behind her. What did you find? I was fumbling with my helmet, trying to get it off, my hands shaking so badly the chin strap kept slipping through my fingers. One of the technicians helped me, unclipped it, pulled it free. The cold air hit my face and I sucked it in, trying to clear my head. "Just a cavity," I said. My voice sounded steady. I was surprised by that. "Opens up down there, but it's empty. Natural formation, probably. Nothing significant." Hayes stared at me. "You signaled emergency. What happened?" "Got disoriented." I was looking at the ice between us, not at her face. "The depth, the darkness. I panicked, sorry." Crane moved closer, studying me. "You look like shit. You sure that's all?" "Yeah, it's deeper than expected. Unsettling." The crew exchanged glances. I saw it in my peripheral vision, the way they looked at each other, the way they didn't quite believe me but weren't going to push. Not out here on the ice, not with the wind picking up and the light starting to fade. We packed up the gear in silence and took the Zodiac back to the Sirius. The formal debrief happened in the common area 2 hours later. Hayes had pulled the GoPro footage and was reviewing it on her laptop while I sat across from her, Crane standing behind my shoulder. The video showed the descent, the shaft, the walls, the opening. Then static. Then nothing. "Equipment failure," I said. "Everything was malfunctioning down there. Compass, GPS, watch, cameras, all of it." Hayes closed the laptop. "And you saw nothing in the cavity?" "Rock walls, some formations, nothing archaeological, nothing worth reporting." I wrote it up in my formal report that night. Shaft descends approximately 600 feet, opens to natural cavity. No archaeological significance. Recommend sealing and moving on. Hayes read it, seemed disappointed but accepted it. Crane signed off on it with a look that said she didn't believe a word but wasn't going to fight about it. "We'll file the report and leave this location tomorrow," Crane said. I went to my bunk and lay there staring at the ceiling. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the console, saw the 3 beings sitting at their stations, preserved and waiting, and tried to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing. Equipment failure, oxygen deprivation, hallucination brought on by depth and pressure and fear. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I'd pressed something, activated something, sent a signal somewhere. I kept telling myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe that symbol meant something else. Maybe it was a status indicator, a diagnostic display, a piece of alien equipment that had been dead for 1,000 years, and my touch had just triggered some residual power in the system. Maybe nothing would happen. I didn't believe it, but I wanted to. The beings kept coming back to me. Those black eyes staring at nothing. I'd seen them, touched their station or whatever. They were real. And they'd been sitting down there for how long? Centuries? Longer? Sitting under Antarctic ice in a chamber, preserved like they'd died yesterday. Nothing about it made sense. Nothing about it was possible. And yet I'd seen them. I kept trying to fit it into some framework my brain could handle. Secret government facility, advanced human technology, hallucination, anything that wasn't what it obviously was. It didn't work. The next 2 weeks were normal. We moved to different survey locations, mapped subsurface structures, collected data. I threw myself into the work, keeping my head down, spending off hours in my bunk pretending to sleep. Nobody mentioned the shaft. The world kept turning. By day 12, I'd almost convinced myself I'd gotten away with it, that the signal had gone nowhere. I started sleeping better, eating normally. Day 12, evening. We were in the common area after dinner, the usual scattered arrangement of crew members avoiding each other while occupying the same space. Someone had the TV on in the background, some nature documentary about penguins that nobody was really watching. Then it cut to breaking news and everyone looked up. The anchor was trying to maintain composure, but you could see the strain in her face, the barely controlled tension of someone delivering information they didn't fully understand. We're interrupting regular programming for breaking news from NASA. Multiple unidentified objects have been detected beyond lunar orbit. The room went quiet. Not gradually, instantly, like someone had flipped a switch. The objects appear to be responding to a signal transmitted from Earth approximately 2 weeks ago. My hands went numb. The anchor continued. We're going now to NASA Administrator Dr. Patricia Mills for more information. Cut to a press conference. Dr. Mills standing at a podium covered in NASA logos, looking like she hadn't slept in days. At approximately 0300 UTC this morning, multiple tracking stations detected a series of objects entering the Earth-Moon system. Based on trajectory analysis and response patterns, these objects appear to be constructed. They are not natural phenomena. Dr. Mills continued. We've successfully triangulated the origin point of the initial transmission, the signal that these objects appear to be responding to. A map appeared on screen. Antarctica, zoomed in, Weddell Sea region, and then coordinates, exact coordinates. Our expedition site, the exact location of the shaft. Timestamp, 14 days ago. Nobody said anything. The silence in the common area was absolute, broken only by the TV audio. Hayes spoke first, her voice very quiet. That's where we were. One of the technicians, the one who'd operated the camera equipment at the shaft. That's the exact coordinates. That's exactly where we found it. Then everyone else turned and looked at me. 6 pairs of eyes, all locked on my face, and I couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything but stare at the TV screen where Dr. Mills was still talking. The objects are now on approach vector toward Earth. Current estimates place arrival in 3 to 6 days. We are coordinating with international partners to... Someone said my name. I think it was Crane. Abati. I couldn't look at her. Couldn't look at any of them. What the fuck was down there? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat was closed, my chest tight, and all I could do was shake my head slightly, a tiny movement that meant nothing. On the TV, objects number in the hundreds. We are monitoring their approach and will provide updates as the situation develops. Hayes stood up from her chair, crossed the space between us in 3 steps. You saw something. You lied in your report. What did you see? I still couldn't speak. She grabbed my shoulder, not hard, but firm. What did you do down there? And finally I found my voice, barely a whisper. I turned something on. You activated what? A signal, a beacon. I don't know. There were 3 of them, at stations, and I touched the console and it lit up and I pressed. My voice broke. I pressed a button. On the TV, Dr. Mills was answering questions from reporters, but I couldn't hear the words anymore. Just white noise, just the sound of my own pulse hammering in my ears. Hayes let go of my shoulder and stepped back. She looked at Crane. Current projections indicate arrival in 3 to 6 days. 3 to 6 days until whatever I'd called arrived. I stood up and walked to my bunk. Nobody stopped me. I closed the door and sat on my bed and stared at the wall. I'd sent a signal, and something was coming. The next 3 days were strange. The world was ending, maybe, and we were stuck on a research vessel watching it happen on TV. The news ran constantly. Same footage, same experts trying to explain something they didn't understand. Panic. Military mobilization. UN emergency sessions that accomplished nothing. NASA confirmed what everyone already knew. The objects were ships, hundreds of them, maybe more, each one massive enough to show up on civilian telescopes. They moved in formation, coordinated in ways that proved intelligence, proved intent. Someone tried to communicate with them. Radio signals, light pulses, mathematical sequences. Nothing. No response. They just kept coming, steady and inevitable, like they'd been planning this route for a very long time. On the Sirius, we watched in silence. Nobody accused me directly. Nobody had to. The looks said everything. I stayed in my cabin mostly, coming out only for meals I barely ate, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Started writing this account because I needed to do something with my hands, needed to get it down before it was too late. Day 6. Morning. I woke to noise on deck, shouting. I pulled on my jacket and went topside. The crew was there, all of them standing in a rough line along the starboard rail. Looking up. Nobody was talking anymore, just staring. The sky was wrong. That's the first thought I had. The second thought was that wrong wasn't strong enough. Objects, dark shapes against the pale Antarctic blue, each one enormous, each one blotting out a section of sky that should have been empty. Ships, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. I couldn't count them all because they stretched to the horizon in every direction. They were just hovering, not moving, not descending, not doing anything. Just there. Each one had to be kilometers across. I could see that even from the surface could gauge the scale by how much sky they blocked out. They formed a pattern, a grid, evenly spaced like they'd been positioned with mathematical precision. And the design, I recognized it. The curves, the angles, the way the surfaces seemed to flow into each other. Same aesthetic as the chamber, same as the stations, same as everything I'd seen 600 feet below the ice. These were them, or their people, their civilization. I'd called them here. I stood on the deck next to the rail, staring up, and tried to process what I was seeing. The three beings in the chamber, what were they? Crew members, scouts, engineers left behind on some survey mission that went wrong. Had they been waiting down there for someone to find them, to activate the beacon, to call their people home? Or had they been trying to stop this? Had they died trying to shut down the signal to prevent exactly what was happening right now? I didn't know, would never know. But it didn't matter because the result was the same. They were here, and I'd brought them. Crane came to stand next to me. She didn't say anything for a long time, just looked up at the ships hanging in the sky like dark clouds that would never move. "It's beautiful," she said. "In a way." I didn't answer, didn't know what to say to that, but I understood what she meant. I'm writing this now. The ships have been hovering for 24 hours and the world is holding its breath. I don't know what they want. I don't know if they're hostile or neutral or something we can't comprehend. But I know I brought them here. I pressed the controls. I activated the signal. I called them home. Maybe the three beings in that chamber were supposed to prevent this. Or maybe they were always meant to be found. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe it was supposed to happen exactly this way. I don't know if I damned humanity or just accelerated something that was already coming. But I need someone to know the truth. If you're reading this, if anyone ever reads this, this is what happened. We found something under the ice, something ancient, something waiting. And I woke it up. The ships are descending now. The sky is dark now, not night. The ships are low enough that their shadows overlap, blocking out the sun completely. I can see them through the porthole, massive shapes hanging in darkness that used to be day. It's quiet on deck. Nobody's shouting anymore. Nobody's giving orders. I think everyone stopped moving, stopped talking. The whole ship is silent. The whole world, maybe. 7 billion people, waiting. It's time. That's the end of our time together tonight. I'm Rex. Thank you for letting me be the voice in your ear while the world sleeps. If you haven't joined the Nocturnal crew yet, hit subscribe and turn on notifications to stay locked in. I'm curious to read what you thought about this one. Stay safe, and I'll be back before the sun comes up.